A very good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the Unified Homelessness Response Center, something we launched right here in the midst of our Emergency Operations Center to coordinate our work to end homelessness in Los Angeles. I started giving regular briefings in 2019 from here each month to let the people of Los Angeles know the full breadth and depth of the work that we were doing to end homelessness in Los Angeles. And also because I know, and this is a reflection too of the other elected officials with me, no issue is and was more important to me. We suspended these briefings in the midst of the pandemic because you certainly heard enough from me every single night. But we always tried to continue to communicate the work that we were doing around homelessness during even the pandemic. Since February 2020, when we were last together here at the Response Center, we've endured a lot of trauma. 27,000 souls taken from us from this pandemic, so powerfully illustrated up at Griffith Park, where 27,000 white flags and this weekend's COVID memorial that talked about the critical workers, the people we've lost, and the help that we can still give one another was beautifully commemorated. And I know it's been a long and a difficult 21 months, but I want you to know we have never stopped working hard to confront homelessness. If anything, even in the midst of the pandemic, we doubled down and accelerated the efforts of what we were doing. One of the most hopeful things, after a number of us have called for a long time for a FEMA-level response to homelessness, is that we started to get it for the first time. We got a national government, and even before we had federal dollars, we stepped up to say we have to treat this like the public health and almost man-made disaster that it is. And in the midst of this devastating pandemic, we've learned a new language, a language of public health, certainly around COVID, that I hope will fuel a lot of the work that we continue to do around homelessness, which at its heart in many ways is at least half a public health pandemic. So let's walk through some of the work we've done. I'm here to share the sober reports, but also the concrete actions and the real progress. And for me, the unshakable optimism that I have about our fight to end homelessness in Los Angeles. So first and foremost, that is rooted in the resources we bring to this fight. In 2013, when I became mayor, and I think two of the three of us were elected, and one shortly thereafter, we had $10 million in our entire city budget to confront homelessness. It was true that most homelessness, the causes in and the policies that are the cures out, didn't rest in the jurisdiction of the city. They're often county and federal and state. But we didn't let that be an excuse, and every year we've built from that 10 million. Until this year, in our justice budget, we had over $1 billion that goes to the myriad of programs and developments to help us end homelessness here in Los Angeles. And another thing, when I became mayor, there was no unit dedicated to confronting homelessness in the city of Los Angeles. And so we built a city homelessness initiative team. It's led today by our deputy mayor, Che Ramirez, and our city administrative office also has one. So that for the first time we could bring together the very complex bureaucratic and policy issues and people that deal with homelessness in one place, and it's also mirrored here in the center behind us. This is a group of extraordinary leaders I'm so proud to work alongside. They bring experience from the nonprofit sector, from the community sector, from the government sector, and lived homelessness themselves. And I think that's so important for folks, whether they're elected officials, whether they're deputy mayors, whether they're folks who are in our teams that we'll be talking about, who have been there themselves. They can marshal that personal experience for the fight of our lives. Now, I know, and we have to always say that we still see too many people sleeping on our streets. I have somebody in a tent at the end of my block who I've engaged with. We see across every neighborhood, whether it's a high-income or a low-income neighborhood, whether it's east side, west side, the valley, or the south side, we see too many people that are still unhoused. But I want you to know, yes, I'm your elected mayor, but first and foremost, I'm an Angelino, and my heart breaks every single day alongside you when we see those encampments and those tents. But until recently, we didn't have the means or the pathway to solve homelessness. So I'm going to use this metaphor because I think it captures the moment. We finally built the car, and we've built the highway. And we have gas in the tank, or maybe because it's LA, we've charged the batteries of the car. And we are moving down that road finally. Nobody should fool themselves that it's going to be a quick journey. It's a long ride. But for so long, we didn't even have the highway built. we didn't have the vehicle ready, and we didn't have the fuel in it. And as long as we are dedicated to that pathway, as long as we keep putting those electrons or that gasoline in the car, we will get there. I'm confident of that. It might not be on any one person's specific watch, but it is irreversible progress. And it is filled, as you'll hear today, with things that work. Today, as I've done in each one of these briefings, I'm going to share my strong determination and my optimism, and you'll hear that from other policymakers. And I'm going to give you a detailed update on our work to move folks indoors and to clean our streets, to make sure our communities are safe, to open shelters, to build supportive and affordable housing, to prevent the most at-risk Angelenos from becoming unhoused, and much more. So let's start where homelessness too often starts, on the street. Let me tell you today about the news we are announcing, a new program that our city has rolled out. It's starting in Venice and in Hollywood, and hopefully coming to your neighborhood soon. We call it CIRCLE. CIRCLE stands for Crisis and Incident Response through Community-Led Engagement. And at the heart of our CIRCLE pilot is a truth. We know that sending somebody with a badge can sometimes be helpful, but it's not the solution to homelessness. We are never going to arrest our way out of this crisis. Instead, our amazing LAPD officers, who I witness every single day their heroism, our fire department, who I see save lives every single day, they are sometimes trained in mental health. We make sure that they're aware of homelessness. But what we really want are deep experts who can most quickly get people off the streets and on their road to recovery. Get this statistic. LAPD receives 140,000 calls each year relating to homelessness. That's more than a call every 4 minutes all year long. It's not a good use of our police resources when we want them out fighting serious crime, nor is it a very effective way to get people off our streets. So with CIRCLE, we're doing two things: freeing up our officers to deal with serious crime, and instead of sending them out, we're sending mental health professionals and 2 crisis workers with lived experience to engage with people in some of their worst moments. These folks are trained, they're unarmed, they're out there in Hollywood and Venice 7 days a week to provide unhoused Angelenos with a compassionate response that meets them where they are. Connect them to services, including shelter, COVID testing, and vaccines. Since this summer, these teams have been focused on our COVID response, and next month they're going to go 24/7, responding to calls in these communities. Yep, through 911. A 911 call that will come out about somebody who is experiencing crisis. We'll send a team out to assess the needs of the individual or the individuals involved, de-escalate where needed, and make referrals to services right there and then to help get folks on a stable path. What kind of calls are we talking about? Well-being checks where there's a concern for a person under the influence of alcohol or narcotics, or if a person is inadequately clothed on the street, something that we've all seen, unfortunately, too often, or need support, or if there are noise complaints and loitering on private property. These teams can go out and de-escalate. In fact, they've already done it hundreds of times. Our CIRCLE teams are extraordinary. And I know this not just from the descriptions others have given me, but because I went out with them in Hollywood to do outreach last month. I know that they are dedicated, they have the lived experience, many of them have been in the criminal justice system, have been unhoused, have faced the dragon of addiction, and they connect with people because it's not some fancy person from City Hall who doesn't understand. It is somebody who looks like, who feels like, and who has lived like them. Spending time with outreach teams is something I've done quietly since I've been mayor. I like to do this to see and to understand what our street strategies are and to use whatever influence I can as a mayor. I'll never forget, seeing people's faces when they're like, "You're the mayor?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the mayor, and this is your day that your life's going to change." Say, this is not going to define you. Let's see what we can do to write a new chapter together. And this time in Hollywood, I met those people and those stories. A Navy veteran from my wife's home state of Indiana. A young man who kind of was the mayor of this encampment in his 20s, living with his girlfriend, ready to get back on his street and the go-to person for all his fellow folks living in that encampment. A woman with deep mental health issues who was clearly self-medicating with alcohol early in the morning. And as different as each one of these folks were, there was one thing that they shared in common, and that is how much they clearly liked and respected the CIRCLE team members. It wasn't just because they were there. I asked them quietly, too, what do you think of these guys? Because I got to assess where we're spending our money. It was the heart of CIRCLE where they said, we love these folks. We trust these folks. They're creating a circle of trust. That circle is a symbol of our unending commitment to getting folks off the street. It's how they convince folks to just take a breather, spend some time maybe away from the encampment where they live. And both Circle neighborhoods add to this program decompression centers, a place to exit that one geographical location that you're at and find some temporary respite from the street, relax, maybe have some water or a snack, get connected to help, start talking to a case manager. So Circle is helping us flip the script. It's providing a more effective model to get unhoused Angelenos the support that they need while freeing up police officers to handle the public safety issues that demand their attention. So now let me turn it over to council members who are doing this work. And I should say we have three amazing council members here today. We've got Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, who you hear about in Hollywood. Councilmember Mitch, do we have Councilmember Rahman too? She's not here? Yeah. Oh, she's here. Four. Oh my gosh, with special guests. Indeed. Welcome, welcome, welcome. They're like, please don't talk about me. We've got four amazing council members here. Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, who's been such a strong supporter of Circle, and Councilmember Rahman, who also in Hollywood will be benefiting from this program and has been so engaged on homelessness. Also, Councilmember Mike Bonin, who's been such a powerful voice and will benefit from some of this work that's happening in Venice. And Councilmember Rodriguez, who is the chair of our Public Safety Committee and who pioneered some of this work even before we had Circle in her district. So I'm very pleased to have them each here to say some words about Circle and some of the other work that we're doing. So let me turn it over first to Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell.
Thank you. Sorry, that's all right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Very well said. You really set the table for this. The vehicle is built. It's electric. It's fully charged. And Urban Alchemy is in the driver's seat. And, you know, Urban Alchemy, my office has been working very closely with them since December of 2020. And the profound impact in a positive way they've made in the 13th District cannot be overstated enough. And as they build capacity and as they hire people from the streets of Los Angeles into their mission, which they are actively doing in the 13th District as we speak, they're managing our tiny home villages. They're doing such great work across the entire district, including Hollywood. We've had Urban Alchemy in Hollywood now for several months. So they're not starting from scratch. When the Circle program began, they had already had these interactions and interventions with the people experiencing homelessness in Hollywood. But folks, they're building their capacity. They cannot float debt. So it is going to be my mission to make sure that the receipts that they provide us are met in a timely fashion so that they can keep expanding this program, whether it's from LASA, which manages all of the street engagement teams, or whether it's our own city departments. We need to pay our practitioners timely so that they can keep doing their work. And that is my commitment to Dr. Miller and the entire Urban Alchemy team. I just cannot state enough how important this program is. We've done a series of motions beginning in June of 2020 in regard to reviewing how our resources are utilized so the city can be more effective and deliver the appropriate type of services for those in need and experiencing homelessness and mental health crises away from the public safety sphere. I have had the great privilege of serving as chair of the Homelessness and Poverty Committee and now the Energy and the Environment Committee, and have been a member of the Public Safety Committee, along with my colleagues here. This process, this initiative is very well served by our own experience as well. On top of the Circle program, more dedicated outreach and homeless population is being done throughout CD13, as I mentioned. And I can't, again, overstate enough the fact that this is a jobs program for people experiencing homelessness. One thing I hear all the time when I'm out in my district is, can we create jobs for people experiencing homelessness? Give them, give people a purpose, give them something to reach up to. And, opportunity is everything for someone's livelihood, their well-being, their esteem. So the fact that as these folks who have the lived experience themselves, and those experiences are so incredibly relevant, when they make contact with someone, there's an immediate connection, and they really do work the magic out on the streets. I've seen it with my own eyes. We've been working with the Circle program, the UHRC, and I've also got to give a shout out to Che. I don't know where he is, but you're right behind me. Okay. My team loves working with you. Urban Alchemy respects you very deeply, and you're doing an amazing job. I hear nothing but good things about you, and my own experience has been terrific with you as well, so I can't thank you enough. It is important to seriously look at this unarmed crises models like the Circle program. We must remember that homelessness is a multifaceted and complex issue, so solutions and substantive responses have to include the whole diverse array of stakeholders. Very glad to be a part of this program. Happy to be pioneering it in Hollywood and in the 13th District. A few other factors that are involved in this overall conversation is we've approved, the county has approved the Trieste model. It's 2.0. Hollywood is the ideal location for this pilot. It's going to complement everything that Urban Alchemy is doing because of its existing network of support, years in the making. Earlier this month, the Board of Supervisors voted on Supervisor Kuehl's motion to approve over $100 million from the state for a 5-year mental health pilot in Hollywood based on the groundbreaking model in Trieste, Italy. And Hollywood Forward, which was founded by Carrie Morrison many, many years ago, was the basis that led to the Trieste model. So I have to give a shout out to Carrie as well. We will be introducing 2 pieces of legislation this week. The first is a motion which will seek to update city-county relationships in government as it relates to the health service delivery. And that means everything for people experiencing homelessness, mental health, and public health. The city will review and update the now over 57-year contract with the county. 1964. That's when we had the agreement with the county. That's when we started it. And the city of Los Angeles eliminated its health department. We've got issues with that. The city will also go on record and restate its policy agenda for the 22 state budget so that we can receive funding commensurate with the need. Los Angeles has half of the number of people experiencing homelessness, the county, in the entire state. Angelenos have taxed themselves twice over locally. Measure HHH and H. According to the latest comprehensive report from LA County on the lead causes of death for people experiencing homelessness since 2017, the number 1 cause of death for homeless individuals is overdosing related to drug use from methamphetamines, opioids, and other drugs laced with fentanyl. It's a real issue. Any of these professional practitioners will tell you that's an issue on the streets. And we have to deal with that, and we need more assistance there. And it's going to take involvement from every level of government. People experiencing homelessness are 36 times more likely to die from drug-induced overdose than the average person in LA County. 36 times. That needs attention. There is a current public safety emergency happening on the streets of Los Angeles, and the city must act and step up. And with the Circle program and all the great work with the mayor's office and my colleagues on the council, we're doing just that. This is a down payment to a long-term solution that Angelenos are understandably demanding of us. So I couldn't be more proud to welcome the Circle program in Hollywood and the 13th District. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Nithiraman, who may be bringing up, she's not only a council member, but she's obviously a parent too. And we've got lots of fun places to be. You can come up. Don't worry. If you want to. Come on. Mom's just going to say a few things. And if you guys want, you can play with the flags. There's like all kinds of computers in there, whatever you want. But we're so excited to have all of you here. Councilmember Ross.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. We have some unexpected guests with us today. Thanks to Thanksgiving holidays. Thank you so much to the mayor, to everyone who's up here with me for inviting me to speak on this program today. One that I know is going to touch the lives of so many of our unhoused Angelenos. Before I was elected to council, I co-founded the Sela Neighborhood Homeless Coalition in a part of the city where there was not a lot of outreach happening for people who are experiencing homelessness. This coalition has now grown into one of the most active, all-volunteer homeless services nonprofits in the city. Our entire approach to homelessness was based on providing outreach and services, and we proved that this was a viable and effective alternative to what we saw around us, which was dealing with homelessness in ways that prioritized enforcement. Now, with the weight of the City Council office behind me, my team and I have championed this same approach and have spent countless hours in the field working to house residents of encampments in my district. Since the Circle program was soft launched during COVID, my office's homelessness team and our other members have seen Circle team members out in the field, introducing themselves to folks, getting to know residents that live on the street, as well as house residents that live in the neighborhoods of Hollywood. They have distributed resources such as masks and hygiene kits and made themselves a presence that is clearly felt in the city. The next time that they're working on an escalated or higher priority issue, these connections are going to be essential. Those connections are going to be the ones that make them a trusted partner, that help really to de-escalate situations, particularly when an individual is vulnerable to issues like mental illness or drug addiction. This is a true community-based alternative to enforcement, and I'm so grateful to the mayor and everybody up on this floor with me for advocating for this program. And I look forward to showing everyone that Los Angeles can be a true model in the country for a humane and effective solution to the nation's homelessness crisis. Thank you very much.
Bravo. Thank you guys for coming and visiting. That was awesome. You guys did, that was your first press conference. And they say short speeches win elections, so I'm voting for the two of you. Next, I'm going to ask Councilmember Mike Bonin to come forward. As we've heard this past year, I've had the joy of working closely with him, as I did with Councilmember Farrell, to really get an encampment to housing strategy very effectively in Venice Beach and now in Westchester Park. And thank you for your advocacy, and love to hear from you as well about Venice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning. Nithya, you got off pretty easy. The first time I brought my kid to a press conference, he was jumping for the microphone. So good job on the parenting. Let me start by saying thank you to Mayor Garcetti for his partnership and for his leadership on homelessness, particularly in my district. He and I have talked about and worked on this issue in my district for quite a while. We have been through some tough town hall meetings together about citing bridge housing there. And last year, during the budget process, I spoke to the mayor quite a bit. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I really need your help in this budget process so that we can deal with the exploding homelessness crisis, particularly in Venice. And Mayor Garcetti really stepped up. Over the summer, when we did our Encampments to Home program, which the mayor helped fund and fought for, we wound up bringing 213 people inside, people that were described as service resistant, people described as wanting to live outside, brought 213 people inside, matched almost all of them with permanent housing resources, and 49 of them are already in permanent housing. That program worked because Mayor Garcetti every single week chaired an interdepartmental meeting with me and city staff and outreach workers from St. Joseph Center and LASA, who did phenomenal work and helped make that happen. And we have been replicating that program over the past couple weeks in Westchester Park, where over the past couple months we have moved about 90 people indoors using the same combination of interim housing in motels matched with emergency housing vouchers from the federal government, which will give people the opportunity to really stay in permanent housing, which is our measure of success. The other thing that the mayor did in response to my ask, for which I'm incredibly grateful, is he stepped up with the Circle pilot program, and he offered this to Hollywood and to Venice, two areas where there really is a particular dynamic with homelessness on the streets, where there are large concentrations of homelessness, where there are large incidences or large numbers of incidences of people experiencing a mental health crisis, and offered this service to Venice and to Hollywood. And I'm very, very excited by it. Things have started as a soft launch because of COVID, and I'm really looking forward to kicking this off. This is a big pivot for Los Angeles, and this is an important pivot for Los Angeles. A year and a half ago, when tens of thousands of people were in the street, and we began in earnest real conversations about how do you provide for public safety in Los Angeles. There were lots of areas of disagreement. There still are. But there was one area where BLM and LAPPL both agreed. And that's that cops should not be on the front lines providing, being the city's first response to homelessness, that someone else should be. And that someone else is our service providers, and that someone else, adding to the team of exceptional service providers we have in the 11th District, including PATH, which has been the lead in our Westchester program, is Circle. And we welcome them. As Circle says, this has got to be community-led, and it's going to be a partnership with Circle to make sure that this is community-led. They have been out doing outreach in Venice for several weeks. They are going to be, in the coming weeks, integrating more with the groups that are on the ground providing services, the service providers and the advocates, to make sure that not only are they responding to a 911 call, but when they get a 911 call and they go out, they already know the person that they're responding to, and they've already built a trusting relationship, and they have services they can plug them into. This is a big deal for Los Angeles. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of work to get this done right, but Los Angeles is on the forefront of doing things differently and doing things right, because we have no choice but to address this crisis and do it in a way that treats people humanely and do it successfully, so we can end this crisis for people who are housed and unhoused together. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, the chair of our Public Safety Committee, who I think understands why this is so important, as I mentioned, really pioneered some of this work of encampment home at Paxton and Bradley in her own district, Sun Valley, and has been a really strong voice. We're so pleased to have Chairwoman Monica Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's really very exciting to be joining you all this morning to announce this pilot, because this is part of our multifaceted approach of how we address homelessness and make sure that we are better resourcing the agencies that are far more prepared to engage with our unhoused population than members of law enforcement. And it will also better afford our members of law enforcement to do the jobs that they were actually trained to do, to help prevent crime. And at a time when our city is facing very real challenges when it comes to working on efforts of crime suppression and prevention, it's imperative that we continue to create alternative approaches, but most importantly, provide the right resources and professionals to address and tend to the needs of the unhoused populations. And so never in the history of Los Angeles have we ever seen an investment quite like this, where not just with respect to outreach in this Circle program pilot, but the impending, the most recent soft launch of our therapeutic mental van initiative that we are doing in concert with the county, where we are leveraging $2.2 million of city investment to earn a $30 million worth of mental health service investment from the county. It is unprecedented, but it is for the reason that my colleagues have mentioned previously, that we must be sure to hold every level of government accountable, to invest the kinds of resources that we need to help not just address our homelessness crisis, but to help allow and enable the resources that we fund in the city for crime prevention efforts to be fully maximized, because they're not distracted by doing the work that they were not trained to do. And so this Circle program presents a lot of hope and optimism for how we will continue to ascend in this work to help not just address homelessness in the city, but to help make sure that our vitally important public safety resources are responding to the very incidents that so many Angelenos are calling for. And I want to take a special moment to acknowledge Mayor Garcetti as we embark upon his final wrap of his leg of leadership. Because as he's indicated, this is the most amount of money our city's budget has ever been reflective of in terms of a commitment to funding and solving the work of our homelessness crisis. And we will never be successful. You know, I always say, and I say this about my team all the time, you are only as good as your team. And the mayor has assembled a great number of really incredible, big-hearted activists, but intelligent individuals like Che, who have been engrossed in this work for their career. And it's the work that we are embarking upon here in Los Angeles is reflective of the team that is involved in helping to solve this crisis. And so I'm really proud that we have too, in my district, as the mayor mentioned, piloted the largest encampment to home that has helped to inform how we approach homelessness throughout the rest of the city. And it's as a result of the work of my colleagues collectively, where each of us are helping to get to the root of what the problems are in our own neighborhoods, that we are then able to take those best practices and expand it across the city. With the resources that are afforded to us in the city budget, we will be making far greater gains than where we have been in the past. And that's a direct result of the priorities that have been set in this budget that were supported by this council. And we will continue to make advancements in expanding these types of pilots that will not only address the deep-rooted causes of homelessness, but to help to address the very problem that we're experiencing on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. And last but not least, and this will end kind of the first third. We know this is a marathon of a press briefing, so this first third is about Circle, second third is about everything else we're doing. The last third is the Spanish version, so feel free as you need to go back to work. But for the people in Los Angeles, we really want to give this the seriousness. I want to turn it over next to Dr. Lena Miller, who is the CEO of Urban Alchemy. Let me just say this, that these contracts, because everybody has a conspiracy theory, are put before none of us, but put before folks who impartially judge who is most effective. And I have two goals, to see Dr. Miller not only continue to expand and accelerate the work to get people off the streets and into housing, and secondly, since she comes from the Bay Area, to turn her into a Dodger fan. But the first one may be more realistic. So first, we'd like to welcome you and the leadership of the men and women who make up these teams. It wouldn't happen without your brilliance. Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Wow, this is a lot of pressure.
No.
I really want to acknowledge and thank the mayor, Deputy Mayor Ramirez, Councilmember O'Farrell, and Councilmember Bonin, because they had the bravery to try something new. The time for rhetoric and philosophy is really over. When you've been in the streets and you really see what's going on, it's too much, it's too heavy, and it's gone too far. I don't know if this is ultimately the answer. What I suspect is that we'll build on it and we'll learn from the lessons. But I know that we have to do something. And what's amazing to me is that the city of Los Angeles, right, took a chance to say where we're gonna put our resources is in this organization, Urban Alchemy, that prioritizes hiring long-term offenders, people who are experiencing homelessness and people who have experienced homelessness, to use their experience, their lived experience, to engage with people who are living in the experience, to really reach out, to be patient, to listen, to connect them with resources. What we did with Urban Alchemy is really elevate those experiences that people have who've gone through a lot of trauma and who've come out the other end, to marry it with the science of psychology and the science of resilience, and then to share that with others around us. I am grateful for this opportunity to be in this place in this time. But I'm going to tell you, I also have a lot of anxiety to start right in the middle of Hollywood where everyone is watching. I'm going to tell you, it's not lost on me. It's heavy.
Wait till you get a load of Venice.
So we are going to do our best to use best practices and to use that part of our soul that takes it from a whole nother place to try to do the impossible. And we are also going to rely on the entire community to root with us, to work with us, because we are doing something that has not been done before. And it won't be easy, but it is worth doing. Thank you. Dr. Lena Miller, Lena Miller, founder, CEO of Urban Alchemy, and the doctor is in PsyD psychology.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Here you go. It's right here. There you go. So I'll start this next section where I began before. The purpose of this briefing, I think so often as elected officials, people come up to us and say, why aren't you trying X? And usually, and now today I can say almost 10 out of 10 times we are. But nobody ever heard that. Nobody had it. So I appreciate the patience of the press for the streaming that we're doing for folks who listen. This is a chance to actually, well, are you trying shelter? Are you trying tiny homes? Are you trying permanent housing? Are you trying new street strategies? Are you trying new engagement strategies? This now is the meat of kind of updating. And I've always divided that into 4 categories. One is our street strategy, our interim housing strategy, our permanent housing strategy, and our prevention strategy. So like I said, if people need to peel off any point, feel free. But I know there's a bunch of homelessness geeks like me, so we're going to pile through this. So let's start first with street strategies. No problem. And I know you have counsel, so don't worry. Over the last 21 months, we've had a new and critical task, ensuring that unhoused Angelenos are protected from a deadly virus. Since the start of this year, we've been out on the streets, and LAFD's mobile vaccination units have visited 800 sites, from encampments to resource events to tiny home villages and bridge home facilities. Over 7,300 people experiencing homelessness have been tested this year, and another 2,000 unhoused folks have been vaccinated by LAFD mobile teams, supporting a county-wide effort that has now vaccinated more than half, we estimate, of the unhoused population, and over 62% of Angelenos experiencing homelessness have now received at least their first dose. The work to connect unhoused folks to testing and vaccines has been life-saving. In fact, you're less likely to have had COVID if you're unhoused than if you're housed. Yeah, feel free to fill in. Come on, if you want to stick around. Saving lives is what our outreach workers have always done. They are the heart and soul of our effort to move people out of a tent and under a roof. And today, there are many more of them on the streets, not just our circle workers. In 2013, we had just 11 city-funded outreach workers for a population of over 30,000 homeless individuals. 11 for 30,000. Today, there are 10 times that number, 124 outreach workers engaging our most vulnerable, unhoused Angelenos. And we've not only increased the quantity of outreach workers, we're increasing the quality of that outreach work. For the first time, we have an effective model. And to me, that's been the most exciting development of the last 6 months, to achieve the shared goals of every neighborhood, house people and clean up our streets, and do it in that order, to make sure people come indoors, get services, and then that we can reclaim public space. The encampment to home model, as I mentioned, can be traced back to early work done at Paxton and Bradley and Councilmember Rodriguez's district in early 2020, work that Councilmember Blumenfield did in Woodland Hills. Since then, it's been successfully employed in Echo Park, in Venice Beach, in MacArthur Park, and Westchester Park. If you told me a few months ago you'd be getting dozens of people a week off the street in these areas, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's the truth. It's given us a much better alternative to sweeping people up and moving them to another neighborhood or leaving things alone to get worse. Those two polar opposites, neither of them are acceptable for me and for our city. And so far, we've housed over 600 people this year through our encampment to home strategies, thanks to the hard work of folks from St. Joseph Center, Urban Alchemy, PATH, LASA, and our city council members. After folks are brought indoors, you say, okay, you got them off the streets, but what happens next? After they're able to store their personal belongings, we're then working with LA Sanitation's Care and Care Plus teams to clean up the neighborhoods, to remove trash, debris, and health hazards from the public right-of-way. And already 250,000 pounds of solid waste have been removed. This is about protecting public health and the environment and keeping our shared spaces clean and safe, making sure that they're accessible to everyone. And with this approach, we're making sure that nobody's gains are at the expense of somebody else, in particular our unhoused neighbors. People are now in a warm place with food and services. Shootings, sexual assaults, overdoses, tent fires are no longer happening in those areas, and our sidewalks and parks are being restored. This is a real victory and real results in our fight to end homelessness. We're not just talking about numbers, though. We're talking about narratives. We're talking about names. People like Nicole, who after fleeing domestic violence found herself living in MacArthur Park with her 3 children. When she first spoke to a PATH outreach worker, Nicole said she felt lost and out of options for housing. But she wasn't. We were there, And PATH provided Nicole with a voucher so that she and her family could move into a motel, and then got them placed at an interim site where a case manager is working on finding their permanent home. We want to create many more Nicoles, which is why in coming months we'll be working with council offices and city departments and other partners to bring this model to all parts of the city, with a particular focus on communities of color who've disproportionately borne the burden of homelessness. And soon we're going to kick off our next operation at El Pueblo, the birthplace of our city, to support the vulnerable folks there. We built 1 and then 2 bridge home facilities, but we still have a lot of folks that are living on the streets, and we know the model that works. It will help our small business owners and merchants at La Placita. It'll be great for folks who come and visit, but first and foremost, it will be great for the folks who today are in a tent and who tomorrow will be indoors. So that's what's happening on our streets. So let's turn next to interim housing, the term we use to define temporary housing and shelter to get people off the streets, out of their tents, maybe out of their cars, and on the road to permanent housing. Since the start of the pandemic, we have brought 13,256 people, 13,256 people off the street across the city. We've stood up 32 congregate and temporary shelters in the midst of a pandemic, which served over 3,200 Angelenos from March to November. Citywide, we saw a 23% increase in beds available from January 2020 to 1 year later. And if you look at our shelter capacity across the county, it's increased by 57% over the last 3 years. That's good news. And as I said earlier, we finally got the FEMA level response to homelessness that is needed. Folks know I've been advocating for this at the federal level for a long time, to move folks off the streets and into motel and hotel rooms before they tested positive for COVID. So last spring, with the state, we launched Project Roomkey. And the goal was to take all the empty hotel rooms during the pandemic, because we didn't have tourists, we didn't have people taking staycations, and making sure that we provided housing for people experiencing homelessness, especially those at greatest risk of becoming seriously ill and dying from COVID, including seniors and people with pre-existing health conditions. Since then, we've served over 4,100 people, new additional rooms through Project Roomkey city-leased sites, and county ones are more on top of that as well. That's more than any major city aside from New York, which is governed by a right to shelter mandate and has long used hotels and motels as their standard shelter model. At the start of this year, I talked to, and the Biden administration announced that it would extend payment for 100% of hotel room costs, which was a bump up and really important. So 100% of our costs get reimbursed. That allowed us to continue placing COVID vulnerable people experiencing homelessness from Skid Row, the encampment that was at Echo Park Lake, into those hotel rooms. And then we advocated and said, please keep this going. It was supposed to end in the middle of the year. And Washington answered our call, recently announcing that FEMA is extending 100% reimbursement through April of 2022. And believe me, we're going to continue advocating to make this a permanent part of the landscape of ending homelessness in America. It's a model that's gaining national attention. It's been written up. It's almost like a new part of a Swiss Army knife that we didn't know was there. A highly effective tool for convincing people on the street who have been resistant to come indoors. So we're adding this to a box filled with tools that are effective at providing folks with safe, temporary housing, like a bridge home. If you remember back when we launched this, we hoped that we might get a dozen, maybe 15, one each council district in 2018. And we've not only exceeded that goal in record time, we've nearly doubled it with 27 bridge home sites, over 2,000 beds. They had to be decompressed during the pandemic, but we can recompress them, already having served 4,300 residents to date. And I said that earlier that this pandemic didn't slow us down. It sped us up, and 20 of those bridge home sites came online during a pandemic, including Raymer in North Hollywood, 85 beds for adults operated by Hope of the Valley, the Arroyo in Sylmar, 85 beds for women that is operated by LA Family Housing, and recuperative care beds, 15 of them for folks coming out of hospitals. The PATH families in Los Feliz, operated by PATH. So we're making tremendous progress in expanding beds in hotels, in congregate shelters, and with state and federal resources, we've added a new mode as well, tiny home villages. This year alone, just this year, we've added 8 villages across the city, over 1,000 beds. These tiny homes have beds, they have shelving, full HVAC systems, so air conditioning and heating, access to storage for pets and additional belongings. Residents get 3 meals a day, social services, counseling, there's hot showers, there's bathrooms, access to staffers who are helping them get to permanent housing. Just last month, we opened the largest tiny home village in the United States of America at Arroyo Seco. 115 tiny homes, 224 beds on Recon Park's property. And we're not done yet. Before the end of the calendar, we've got 2 more coming, in Eagle Rock with 93 beds and Westlake with 107. Finally, in the temporary place, we've been expanding our safe parking by 10 sites. We now have 19 sites across the city. The people who are experiencing homelessness, who are sleeping in their vehicles, can have a safe place to be. And we launched our first safe sleep site in the 13th Council District, run by PATH. People have often said, can you just move all those tents to a parking lot? Well, that's what we did. We made sure the tents were good and functioning, that people were off the streets and off the sidewalks. They have access to hygiene and other services and case management on a pathway to housing. Third, after a temporary place to stay, we're working harder and more effectively than ever to find people permanent housing, a forever home, because we know nothing ends homelessness like a home. As I've said before, our goal is not to address homelessness or manage homelessness or reduce homelessness. Our North Star has to be to end homelessness. And the solution is simple: build more housing. Thanks to the voters and our investment in HHH, we are building that housing. You might have heard some things like it's slow and costly and not coming in. Those are falsehoods. With $1.2 billion in construction funding, we've more than tripled our annual production of supportive housing units from about 300 to 1,000 a year. And we're going to come in early with more units for a cheaper price than we promised the voters. That's the truth. This pandemic didn't slow us down. In 2020, we broke ground on 25 HHH projects and completed 6 developments. There's so many happening that I can't even make every groundbreaking and ribbon cutting. We've increased our pace in 2021. By the end of the year, we will have broken ground on 43 this year, topping those 25 projects like Weingart Towers, the biggest in our city's history in Council District 14, a 2-phase development in Skid Row, the largest homeless housing development in city history. Weingart will provide 382 Angelinos housing and services, more than 3 times the amount of units of the next largest HHH development. We also broke ground in the Valley on the Van Owen Apartments, 49 units in North Hollywood. And our first HHH housing challenge, when people said, let them build it differently, figure out different, quicker ways to do it, we said, okay. And we put it out to bid. And this is the first one using innovative prefabricated modular housing to complete in a year at a cost of $100,000 less per unit than the average cost today. Altogether, 164 different projects. I know these numbers can be mind-numbing, but they are each filled with dozens of units, with 10,800 units coming nearly 1,000 units above what we promised 2 years earlier and for $15,000 less per unit than we promised. 125 of those projects, over 8,000 apartments, are HHH funded. So I want to pause and acknowledge that rap on HHH is wrong and set the record straight that it's faster, cheaper, and more plentiful than what we thought. Speaking of folks moving into the permanent homes, we expect to celebrate the opening of 32 projects this year. So 32 will open. I want to just tell you about a few of them. Isla de Los Angeles in Council District 8, built on an underutilized section of the public right-of-way using shipping containers for 54 units, which will open in April of 2022. The Rose Apartments in Council District 11 in Venice, 34 supportive housing units that will open in August. The Path Villas, Hollywood, Council District 13 in the heart of Hollywood, with 60 supportive housing units opening in September, and many more. You will see supportive housing opening across the city, in your neighborhood and in others as well. And you will see exponential growth. You will see this car that I described accelerating when it comes to permanent housing, allowing us to more than triple our annual production, deepen our commitment, and attracting more federal and state dollars. And we're doing our part. The other thing people have said, it takes too long. It's true. Finding land, getting plans approved, and getting them built can take long in a place like Los Angeles. But in April, I signed Executive Directive 30 to make sure we cut through all the red tape that we have. And as a result, affordable housing projects are now getting permits 100 days faster than other projects. And even though we're doing it faster than we expected, it is a fact that it takes time. But that's why I've been such a proponent, working together with the Newsom administration, and I want to thank our governor for his focus and the legislature on this issue, of Project Home Key. Remember, Room Key is for hotels and motels. HomeKey answers that question so many people ask. Well, can't you just buy those motels? Can't you buy that apartment building that's being constructed? Can't you make more homeless housing by just buying what's already there? Well, yes, we can. And yes, we did. In fact, with state funds, we acquired 15 buildings, the most in the state. And when we ran out of state money, we figured out how we could find our own money and do 8 more. So we have 23 Project HomeKey sites. And we hope that the state, now with a $31 billion surplus for this year, will double down on that again. We will buy and acquire properties, family projects that don't require substantial renovation, ones that we can get people into permanent housing even more quickly than the HHH projects. We need to do everything possible to keep the number of people experiencing homelessness from going up, which brings me to the last part, prevention. The last topic I'm going to cover is prevention, because we know we can get better and better. This car can keep going, but if this brake is applied to the car of the influx of newly homeless Angelenos, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be stuck right where you are. Today, 79% of extremely low-income renters in Los Angeles paid more than half of their income in rent. These folks are one unforeseen expense away from being unable to pay that rent. A medical emergency, a divorce, a job loss, car repair. And for too long, for too many people in LA, we've been rent burdened, which is why I've been such a strong proponent for building more housing at any level and more affordable housing for those who are rent burdened. In fact, we have tripled the pace of building housing from when I started as mayor. It was about 8,000 units a year, and we were over 22,000, nearly tripled, in 2019, our last good year for stats. And those numbers are heading in the right direction. We've increased and authorized more affordable housing in the last 3 years than we had in the previous 30 years. We are the first big city, though, during this pandemic to ensure nobody else would become homeless. Remember, everybody said all these people are going to lose their housing? Well, we were the first big city in America to put a moratorium on evictions. Many other cities and states and our national government followed. But we also realized a moratorium was one thing. People needed legal protections. And so free legal assistance to prevent people from being unfairly evicted and to have an advocate on their side. And then also to help landlords get their rents so that they could pay their mortgages, we launched Stay Housed LA. It's the largest emergency rental assistance program in the country. We started before there was a national program using discretionary dollars that we received from the coronavirus relief funds, over $100 million to serve more than 49,000 households. Combined with our efforts this year, the city has provided $556 million in rental assistance to 90,000 Angelenos to help them pay their debt, to stay housed, to help our landlords, and to help our city recover. And through our recent partnership with the state, Angelenos can tap into the state's $5.2 billion in emergency rental relief funds. There is no reason somebody should become homeless because they can't pay their rent due to the pandemic. You can learn more at housingiskey.com to apply for those funds if you're one of those people who's on the edge. I've shared a lot of important numbers with you, a lot of programs, and a lot of amazing people. But I want to close with a message of hope, with the sentiment that I carry with me every day in my heart, that I feel inspired by when I work with this team that you see here. There's a profound and fundamental shift underway. I know we live in a society that says, fix this and fix it now, and I share that sense of urgency. I want Angelenos to know there hasn't been a single day that I haven't worked on this issue or felt that urgency, added a few more pennies, a couple more people, and more programs. But by looking at what works, some people have said, well, the car must be broken. It's not. It's on the highway for the first time. It's not time to slow down. It's time to put our foot on the gas and accelerate. We have a model for managing our public space and bringing people indoors for the first time that is showing success across the city, bringing people across ideologies to recognize results. And we have a new and innovative interim housing strategy that makes housing available and continuing to come online. We've acquired properties for permanent housing. We're building developments at a pace we dreamed about. It's always true that we've needed an all-hands-on approach during this crisis. It's more true now than ever. It's critical that we keep making the most of this moment. So what can you do, the average Angeleno who might be listening today? Well, here's a few things you can do to help. If you're a landlord, we need you. And trust me, you'll get your rent every month on time, if you join with us. Open up your available units to formerly unhoused folks. We have city-funded rapid rehousing vouchers and 3,300 emergency housing vouchers that I lobbied in Washington to bring to places like Hollywood. And thanks to the Biden administration and Congress, we'll be moving forward. These can subsidize your rent till 2030. You can provide a home to a tenant in real need of stable housing. And our friends at PATH have built this amazing tool called Lease Up. It will connect you as a landlord to interested tenants who have already a housing subsidy. And we're joined today by PATH's Deputy CEO and Executive Director, our friend Jennifer Hart-Dietz. Where's Jennifer? Oh, right here. You're hiding in plain sight. And thank you, Jennifer, for your and your team's amazing work. If you want to learn more about that and you're a landlord, go to leaseupla.org or just call us at 323-478-4742. If you're not a landlord but an everyday Angelino, call your representatives right now in Washington to make sure that final reconciliation package known as Build Back Better passes. The House has passed it. We need the Senate to pass it because in there's billions of dollars in housing, including an expansion of our housing dollars. We need the federal government to recognize, as the state now has for the last few years, this isn't just a local problem. When I was in Washington, D.C. for the infrastructure bill, when I visited during the Trump administration and the Biden administration, I see tents that are a block away from the White House. This isn't just about L.A. This isn't just about Seattle. This isn't just about Las Vegas. This is about this entire country. So you can help us. And also call Sacramento. Make sure that that $31 billion I mentioned goes disproportionately into continued homelessness solutions. It has been such a difficult 21 months. The trauma, the loss, and the grief that we've lived through. On the streets, we have human beings who live with that every single day. But you've demonstrated to me as a city your grit, your determination, and your heart, that you believe in each other and that you want to help each other. It's made me proud every single day to be your mayor. So let's carry that wisdom and that message forward. Let's lead with compassion and caring, and let's stay focused on 2022 so we can look back at another year of momentum, another year when we move closer to our goal of ending homelessness here in Los Angeles. With that, I'm happy to answer questions. And for the Spanish stations, who I apologize, lo siento mucho, then I'll say some things in Spanish as well. Yes. Sure. Jane? Right. Absolutely. I'm going to ask Chair Ramirez, that's C-H-E, Ramirez, normal spelling, because I'm all about leadership stepping up, our Deputy Mayor of City Homelessness Initiatives, to describe a little more.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so we'll have 2 teams of 3 that will be on a 24/7 alert overnight throughout the day, 7 days a week, to respond to calls that come into the 911 related to homelessness. We also have embedded teams that are out on the ground during the day. And so basically when calls come into 911, there's a list of kind of items that are deemed appropriate to divert to the circle teams. So the mayor highlighted some of those earlier. There could be someone in distress out in the street, unclothed, someone under the influence, someone needing help. So it could be a neighbor calling out of concern. It could be someone else in that encampment calling out of concern. And so rather than have LAPD respond, we would have the circle teams notified, and they would respond to engage, assess, de-escalate, and provide support for that individual or individuals in that space. So we have training for the call center, at the folks at 911 call center that know how to divert those calls based on the information that's coming in.
So, but how many circle team members are there?
48 total.
And that's embedded teams during the day as well as the 24/7 overnight teams. The pilot runs through, yes, it runs through the end of this fiscal year.
So June 30th next year.
What do you think about the proposed ballot measure that the city council is debating today?
You know, I have to say, honestly, I'm skeptical of just reclaiming public space without resources. I've always said it's reasonable for people who want to say, hey, I can't even walk on a sidewalk, for folks with ADA issues, for parks that if you have no backyard is the only place you can play. But if it doesn't come with resources, we don't want cynical solutions that are about saying you can't be here and maybe just push it into other cities. We've been the victim of that. There's a lot of cities whose police departments and others don't let people be unhoused. But it's not because they house them, they push them away. They don't get sued because they're not as big as Los Angeles, but it's probably a legal activity. And I would want to make sure that any, whether it's ballot initiative or policy that moves forward, even for a block, let alone for a city, can only come after there's adequate resources. And today I don't see, even as much as we've built, that we're there yet.
To what extent was the timing of this press conference time to coincide with that vote?
Zero. I said, let's get back to doing these monthly. Nothing to do with that.
Okay, on a completely different matter.
Yes, you've been very patient.
Apparently there's been some organized looting situations that are taking place up north.
Yeah.
And Beverly Hills.
Yep.
Apparently last night at the Grove. I wonder if you could talk to us about the Grove.
A couple things. One is there's no place for this kind of criminal behavior. It needs to be addressed. There need to be consequences, and I think LAPD is more than adequately equipped to not only confront that, but hopefully we'll have a criminal justice system that will show there's consequences. I think many of us are all for the criminal justice reforms that don't put people in prison for 20 years for a gram of something too much. But right now, when we have a situation where people aren't serving even a day and coming right out and repeating what they're doing, people who are stealing cars and it's the same person 5 times in a row and they've been arrested 4 times and they're serving 0 time. We also need judges and we need a jail system that will step up and do some of the rehabilitative work and the penalty that doesn't seem to exist right now. But we're monitoring it closely. We haven't been hit anywhere like we've seen in other places, and we'll offer not just responses to, but I can't speak more about this, but the detective and investigative work to make sure. We've been doing this not just with those sort of hits, but when we've seen rings that hit homes too, we've been quite effective. I think you've heard the chief recently at actually getting to where this is coming from rather than just responding to the calls and making sure we don't just get those quote unquote soldiers on the street, but the people who are actually pushing these crime strategies.
About that, the governor has asked CHP to control shopping centers. Is that happening here?
I don't know. Let me get back to you. I haven't heard that it's happening here. I know in San Francisco he was talking about it first, but yeah. No, I can't for about 28 days, they say, minimum. So I didn't talk to the president. I saw many members of his cabinet. I saw the second gentleman, a bunch of senators. It was no, we didn't talk about. I mean, senators. I'm ongoing talking with them all the time. Yeah. Okay, ready for the Spanish one? Any last question? Then we'll do the Spanish.
$200 million budget increase.
Sorry.
LAPD wants a $200 million budget increase.
I always look at, I don't look at numbers, I look at programs. I mean, if we're looking at, for instance, better community policing, we're looking at better training and de-escalation work. I mean, I don't dismiss dollars. And I think that we do need to put dollars in crime fighting that works and in programs that work. So I don't, to me, it's not, oh, are you cutting the budget? Are you increasing the budget? Tell me what you need it for and what you're going to spend it on. For instance, I do believe that we need to put some resources to make sure that we're hiring to not fall further. Which is a real worry. And so I'm working with the personnel department, others, what resources do we need for background checks, things like that, which have nothing to do with expanding a program. It means keeping the resources we have in place. Okay. Thank you to any English press that's leaving, and muy buenos días. If you guys need to take a rest too, don't worry. You don't have to stand the whole time. I'm fine. Don't worry. Muy buenos días a todos y gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Yo estoy aquí en el centro de emergencias por la ciudad de Los Ángeles porque hay una emergencia, la crisis de indigencia aquí en Los Ángeles. En el 2013, cuando entré a la alcaldía, teníamos solo 10 millones en nuestro presupuesto para combatir la indigencia. Este año, nuestro presupuesto de justicia invierte casi $1,000 millones para luchar contra este problema. Hemos invertido en soluciones que funcionan y debemos seguir adelante. Hoy les comparto mi determinación y mi optimismo. Estoy orgulloso de anunciar Circle en inglés, un nuevo programa que nos ayudará a mantener a todos seguros. Por medio de este programa desplegamos expertos en salud mental en vez de oficiales de policías armados, en respuesta a llamadas no de emergencia relacionadas con personas sin hogar. Estos profesionales han estado en Hollywood y Venice los 7 días de la semana y a todas horas desde el verano pasado para proveer a los angelinos sin vivienda ayuda compasiva que los conecte con servicios incluyendo refugios, pruebas de COVID y vacunas. Y hasta ahora, por medio de nuestro departamento de bomberos, hemos vacunado a más de 2,000 de nuestros vecinos sin vivienda y proveído pruebas de COVID a 7,300 personas. Mientras que este programa es una nueva adición a nuestra lucha contra la indigencia, dedicaré el resto de esta sesión informativa a hablar sobre nuestro trabajo en 4 áreas claves: estrategias en las calles, vivienda temporal, vivienda permanente y la prevención de indigencia. Por primera vez, Los Ángeles tiene un modelo efectivo para abordar el tema de los campamentos a través de la ciudad. Un modelo por el cual escucharemos a los residentes, limpiaremos la ciudad y por el cual proveeremos vivienda a nuestros vecinos sin hogar. Estoy hablando de nuestros esfuerzos en Echo Park, Venice y MacArthur Park, que ya han albergado a más de 600 angelinos sin hogar y devuelto algunos de nuestros espacios públicos a nuestras comunidades. Ahora hablaremos de viviendas temporales, las cuales pueden sacar a la gente de la calle y ponerlas en un camino hacia una vivienda permanente. Desde el comienzo de la pandemia hemos sacado 13,256 personas de las calles, un número increíble, un sueño para mí, y abierto 32 refugios, los cuales han servido a más de 3,200 angelinos desde marzo hasta noviembre. Lanzamos los proyectos Room Key y Home Key el año pasado y estos programas nos han ayudado a obtener miles de habitaciones para angelinos sin vivienda. Hasta ahora estos programas siguen en función. También hemos construido 27 nuevos refugios a través del programa A Bridge Home, el cual ha producido más de 2,000 camas en toda la ciudad nueva. Hemos construido casas pequeñas, refugios temporales y abierto sitios seguros de estacionamiento para miles más de personas. Pero el trabajo no para allí. Necesitamos más viviendas permanentes, hogares con servicios de apoyo para todos los angelinos sin vivienda. Con la proposición HHH y gracias a los votantes de Los Ángeles, estamos produciendo más de 10,000 unidades de vivienda permanente por debajo del presupuesto y más rápido de lo prometido. Los resultados de este programa hablan por sí solos. Gracias a nuestra inversión en este programa estamos construyendo viviendas tan necesarias con $1.2 mil millones en fondos para la construcción. Hemos más de triplicado nuestra producción anual de viviendas de 300 a 1,000 unidades por año. La pandemia no nos frenó. En el 2020 comenzamos la construcción de 25 proyectos HHH y terminamos 6 otros. Y este año aumentamos nuestro ritmo. Para finales del año habremos comenzado la construcción de 43 proyectos. Tenemos 1,000 unidades más 2 años antes y más baratas por unidad de lo prometido. Este programa no solo trabaja bien, sino que supera los objetivos que fijamos. Esto no sucede a menudo en la política y estoy muy orgulloso de que este programa sea tan exitoso. Por último, hablaré de la prevención. En el 2020, el 79% de los inquilinos de ingresos extremadamente bajos en Los Ángeles pagaron más de mitad de sus salarios por alquiler. Es por eso que fuimos la primera gran ciudad en la nación en emitir una moratoria sobre los desalojos para inquilinos y pequeños negocios. Y ahora, inquilinos pueden obtener acceso a $5.2 mil millones del Estado en fondos de ayuda del alquiler de emergencia. La aplicación sigue abierta. Obtenga más información yendo a housingiskey.com. He compartido muchos datos importantes con ustedes hoy sobre nuestras inversiones a quienes hemos ayudado, el número de habitaciones disponibles y viviendas en construcción o abiertas. Quiero cerrar con un mensaje de esperanza y un llamado de acción. Si usted es un propietario y tiene unidades disponibles, ábralas a personas sin hogar. Tenemos vales de alquiler para viviendas financiados por la ciudad y 3.300 más financiados por el Plan de Gobierno Federal de Rescate. Estos vales proveen ayuda hasta el 2030. Para más información, vaya a leaseup.la.org o llame a 323-428-4742. Los últimos 21 meses han sido muy difíciles. Hemos pasado por traumas y pérdidas, pero también crecimiento. Hemos aprendido que juntos podemos superar cualquier desafío. Nos hemos ayudado el uno al otro en maneras nunca antes vistas. Y hemos demostrado coraje, determinación y corazón, lo que me hace orgulloso todos los días de ser su alcalde. Fuerza y amor, Los Ángeles. Muchísimas gracias. With that, happy to answer any questions in Spanish too.
How about one more in English?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So last week, Sheriff Villanueva said it's a simple issue. I can clear up the homeless issue, no problem. You know, I just need cooperation from the rest of the people in the city. What's your answer to that? I don't know if you saw it, but it was
I didn't see it. As I said before, if I thought press conferences would add more housing, I'd do this every single day. And we welcome. There's some good units in the sheriff's office that do outreach similar to LAPD, but I think fundamentally law enforcement are not those experts, and the record proved it. In Venice, we heard that too, but you know, I'd say 99.9% of the housing that we did there did not come from the work that was done led by law enforcement, whether it was LAPD or the sheriff's office in this case. We depend on law enforcement. I thank the not only officers but the deputies in both of those organizations for the incredible work they do. But I think that this is not about permissions. This is not about sweeping people up. It's about making sure there's resources, and those resources are brought together right now. We welcome the sheriff and the sheriff's department to be an active member of that team, not to be cowboys on their own. Thank you.